People often say that heartbreak belongs to the young, teenagers, lovers, newlyweds. But they've never stood where I stood, in a dim recovery room, the machine still humming from surgery, and heard their own granddaughter, my little girl who once clung to my shoulders, whisper words sharp enough to split bone. She opened her eyes slowly, still pale from anesthesia, and when she saw me, I thought I glimpsed the child who used to run into my arms. But the softness vanished. Her face stiffened, and with a shaking breath she whispered, "I'm not your family anymore. I choose them." At 66 years old, I thought I'd built enough strength to weather any storm, but nothing prepares you for the moment a piece of your heart decides to walk away. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I didn't ask who they were, the ones she was choosing over me. I just stood there, my hands trembling against the railing of her hospital bed, and realized something I wish I never had to learn. The deepest wounds in life aren't carved by enemies. They're carved by the ones you raise with love. And handed your heart to without hesitation. If you've ever watched someone you love change into a stranger. If you've ever felt your memories rewritten by someone else's lies. If loyalty ever became a weapon used against you. Then stay. Because this isn't a story about losing family. It's a story about discovering who was willing to tear it apart. Before I tell you everything, hit subscribe so you don't miss stories like this one. Now, let me begin. People say old age makes you softer, more forgiving, more patient, more willing to overlook the cracks in people. But that isn't true. Age doesn't soften you. It sharpens you. It makes you see the places where love bent too far, and the hands that never deserved to hold your trust in the first place. In the days after her surgery, I kept replaying that moment in the recovery room. My granddaughter's voice, thin, trembling, but certain, echoed in my chest like a steel beam snapping under weight. I choose them. 3 words, yet they carried the force of a lifetime collapsing. I wasn't angry at her. How could I be? A 17-year-old recovering from a knife in her body and poison in her ears. But I knew, deep in my bones, that someone had spent months, maybe years, twisting her heart in the shadows. Someone who needed me gone. Someone who wanted my role erased, my influence scrubbed away, my love rewritten into something ugly. And the truth about family is this. It's never the strangers who turn your grandchildren against you. It's always the people sitting close enough to touch your table. That was the part that stung. Not the rejection, but the knowledge that someone inside her home had carved those words into her mind until she believed them. I've lived long enough to understand the anatomy of betrayal. It never begins with hate. It begins with whispers. With small distortions. With someone else painting over your memories until the child who once adored you looks at you through another person's eyes. But this isn't a story about despair. It's about truth, cold, sharp, and unforgiving. The kind of truth that doesn't ask for permission. The kind that rises whether people want it to or not. And if you're listening now, maybe it's because a part of you knows what it feels like when the people you love most are used as weapons against you. For your sake, and mine. I'm going to tell this exactly as it happened. The morning it all began wasn't dramatic. There was no thunder, no warning, no sign that my life was about to tilt on its axis. I remember sitting on my porch, the old cedar boards creaking beneath my rocking chair, watching the dawn spill gold across the tree line. The lake below my house was calm, so still it looked like a sheet of glass laid carefully over the world. That quiet was deceptive. Calm always is. I cradled a cup of coffee between my hands, letting the warmth settle into my fingers. And on the small table beside me lay a wooden pendant, the one I carved for my granddaughter when she turned 5. A tiny heart with a single groove down the center, shaped by her own little hands guiding mine. She wore it every year until high school, when life began pulling her in different directions. But she kept it. That was enough for me. Or so I believed. My phone buzzed just as the sun broke free from the horizon. I expected a routine update from my daughter, Maybe a text saying the surgery went well, maybe a blurry photo of my granddaughter waking up. Instead, it was a voicemail from the hospital. Calm, professional, and strangely distant. They said she was out of surgery and resting, but there was something in the nurse's voice that tightened my chest. She hesitated. Nurses never hesitate unless there's more to say. I tried calling back. No answer. I dialed again. Straight to voicemail. For years, my granddaughter's first instinct, good news or bad, was always to call me. After school. After exams. After her first heartbreak. She used to joke that I was her emergency contact for life. But that morning, silence. A silence so unnatural it felt manufactured. The lake shimmered as a breeze stirred the water's surface, breaking the perfect reflection. Watching the ripples spread, I felt something unsettled crawl through me. A sense that the stillness around me wasn't peace, it was the moment before a storm tears the sky open. I picked up the pendant, running my thumb over the small groove she made all those years ago, and whispered to myself. Something's wrong. And I was right. Because what came next wasn't just misunderstanding. It was the beginning of a betrayal carved slowly, expertly, and deliberately into the heart of my family. 2 hours after that unsettling voicemail, the hospital finally called again, but this time, it wasn't a nurse. It was him. The man who married into our family 2 years ago, the one my granddaughter never fully warmed up to, no matter how hard she tried. His voice came through the phone clipped, controlled, and carrying that familiar edge of forced authority. Don't come to the hospital, he said before I could even ask how she was. She doesn't want visitors. I felt my breath catch. She asked for me. I asked quietly. A long pause. Too long. She's tired, he finally said. Confused. She needs rest. It's best you stay away. The lie was small, but I've lived long enough to hear the shape of dishonesty. His tone didn't match his words. It wasn't concern, it was possession. Someone trying to guard territory that didn't belong to them. I just want to see her, I said. 2 minutes. I'll stand in the doorway. No, he snapped, quick now, like he'd been waiting for me to push back. Let the doctors do their job. She doesn't need you. Not, she doesn't want to see you. Not, she's asleep. But she doesn't need you. A sentence crafted to cut, not inform. He hung up before I could ask anything else. I sat there with the silent phone pressed to my ear, staring into the morning light as if answers might rise with the sun. My granddaughter had always needed me, maybe not for money or support, but for safety, for guidance, for comfort. For stability. For truth. She wouldn't say something like that. Not voluntarily. Not after a surgery. Not after everything we'd built. I tried calling my daughter next. Straight to voicemail. Tried again. Nothing. On the third attempt the phone didn't even ring, it went dead immediately, like the line had been declined. That was when the quiet morning shifted. The breeze stilled. The birds vanished from the trees. And I felt a chill settle through me, not fear, but recognition. Someone was controlling the flow of information. Someone was deciding who she could trust. And who she was allowed to love. I grabbed my keys, the wooden pendant still in my jacket pocket, and headed for the truck. If they thought a few clipped words over the phone would keep me away, they didn't understand a grandfather's resolve. I wasn't going to shout or cause trouble. I simply needed to see her with my own eyes. Because something in our family had shifted. And I wasn't about to let that shift turn into a fracture. The drive to the hospital felt longer than it should have. Every red light stretched into an eternity, every slow-moving car a reminder that something precious was slipping away from me. By the time I parked, my hands were tight around the steering wheel, the wooden pendant warm in my pocket from how often I'd held it. I walked through the hospital doors expecting the usual sterile calm, but the air felt different, tense, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I asked the receptionist for my granddaughter's room number, and she gave it without hesitation. It wasn't until I reached her hallway that the blockade appeared. He stepped out from around the corner like he'd been waiting. Her stepfather. He crossed his arms, leaning against the wall as if he owned the place. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low but sharp. "I told you that." "I'm here to see my granddaughter," I replied. "I won't stay long." "She doesn't want to see you." He said it too quickly. Too confidently. His eyes flicked toward the room behind him, and I caught a glimpse through the partially open door. A pale arm. And 4 line. My granddaughter, turned away from the doorway. "I'll ask her myself," I said, stepping forward. He moved immediately, blocking the door with his body. "Don't make this difficult." "I'm not here to cause trouble," I said calmly. "I just want to see her face." "One moment. She doesn't want you." This time, he didn't even pretend it was about her well-being. His voice wasn't protective, it was territorial. There was something in his eyes, something I had seen only a few times in my life, the look of a man who needed control more than honesty. I glanced past him again. The curtain was drawn now. Someone had pulled it closed. Before I could say another word, my daughter appeared behind him. Her eyes were red, her expression tight with exhaustion, and something else. Something like guilt. "Dad," she whispered, not meeting my eyes, "this isn't the right time." "She asked for me." I asked. Another too long pause. "She's confused," she finally said. "She needs rest." The lie trembled on her tongue, but she said it anyway. I swallowed hard, feeling something cold settle in my chest. "Just tell her I came." I turned away before they could see the crack in my resolve. As I walked back down the hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzed above me, flickering as if even they knew I had just been shut out of a room that used to welcome me without question. The storm wasn't coming. It had already started. Driving home from the hospital felt like drifting through fog, everything familiar, everything known, yet somehow distant. The world outside my windshield blurred into streaks of gray, but inside my mind, memories sharpened with painful clarity. If I couldn't reach her now, then I needed to remember who she was before they got to her. Because that girl, the one lying in that hospital bed, wasn't the child I raised with my own hands. The real her was born on a warm June evening, the day I held her for the first time. I still remember the weight of her, tiny, fragile, yet somehow more powerful than anything I had ever carried. I whispered to her, "You'll never do life alone. Not while I'm breathing." And for years, she believed me. She spent half her childhood in my workshop. While most kids wanted toys, she wanted tools. I taught her how to sand wood without splintering her fingers, how to oil hinges so they wouldn't squeak, how to use a measuring tape and trust the line, not her guess. She carved her initials into every scrap piece she touched, leaving an army of crooked letters behind. I still have some of them. On her 7th birthday, she told her entire class that her grandpa was better than superheroes. I laughed when her teacher told me, but my granddaughter didn't. She crossed her arms, stomped her tiny foot, and said, "It's true. He fixes everything." And at the time, I believed I could. I taught her to ride a bike on the gravel road behind my house. She fell so many times that her knees looked like patchwork, but she never cried. Every time she hit the ground she'd shout, again, until she finally wobbled down the road, screaming for me to watch. She used to sit beside me at the lake, feet dangling above the water, asking questions faster than I could answer them. Why did fish sleep with their eyes open? Why do grown-ups pretend they're not sad? Why does love make people brave? I never imagined I'd live long enough to see love used against her. The hardest memory surfaced as I pulled into my driveway. She was 14, standing in my kitchen with tears running down her cheeks after a fight with her mother's husband. She didn't tell me what it was about, only that he made her feel small. I held her while she cried into my shirt and told her, "You are never small. Never to me." She believed me then. She trusted me then. That trust was the foundation of everything between us, stronger than blood, stronger than distance. She was the one who insisted on celebrating every birthday with me, mine and hers. She was the one who brought me handmade cards filled with crooked hearts. She was the one who begged me to teach her how to build a bookshelf, just like yours. She was the one who called me, my favorite person in the world. So when they blocked me from her hospital room, when they lied through clenched teeth and said she didn't want me, it didn't match anything I knew about her. Someone had been whispering in her ear long before the surgery. Someone had been chiseling at our bond, one small lie at a time, until she doubted the man who'd raised her almost as much as her own parents did. Standing in my kitchen that night, surrounded by half-finished wood projects and memories too sharp to touch, I finally understood. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't recovery. This was manipulation, slow, deliberate, patient. And whoever was behind it had been working for years. The next morning, the world felt strangely hollow, as if someone had taken a shovel to the earth beneath my feet and scooped out everything solid. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the wooden pendant, its small groove catching the morning light, and I knew, without a doubt, that her rejection in the hospital wasn't born from her own heart. My granddaughter had always been direct, emotional, honest to a fault. If she were angry with me, she would say it with fire, not a rehearsed whisper delivered like a script. Someone had fed those words to her. I just didn't know who. Not yet. Later that day, I got my first clue from a source I didn't expect, the neighbor who lived next door to my daughter. Her name was Ellen, a quiet, gentle woman who spent most of her time tending a garden that bloomed brighter than any yard on the street. She called me as I was finishing my second cup of coffee. "Peter. I don't know if I should be telling you this," she began, voice trembling slightly, "but I thought you should hear it." I listened, heart pounding, as she went on. "I heard her stepfather arguing with your daughter last night. Loud enough that I could hear through my window. He said the girl shouldn't see you anymore. That you were a bad influence. That you—" She hesitated. "That I what?" I pressed, my voice low. "That you abandon people when they need you," she said, almost whispering it, as if saying the lie out loud made it too real. My jaw clenched. I have never abandoned anyone in my family a day in my life. When my daughter lost her first job, I took on weekend shifts to support her. When she divorced her first husband, I let her and my granddaughter live with me for 9 months until she could stand on her own feet again. Abandonment? No. That word didn't belong anywhere near my name. But it wasn't the lie that bothered me most, it was the strategy. Lies like that don't come from anger. They come from fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of being exposed. Fear of someone else becoming more important than you. As Ellen spoke, more pieces clicked into place. She told me the stepfather had recently taken more control in the household, deciding who visited, who didn't, what information reached my granddaughter, and what didn't. He'd been complaining about me for months, calling me old-fashioned, a meddling relic, dangerous for the girl's independence. Dangerous? Me? I hung up the phone with Ellen and sat back in my chair, letting the truth settle like a weight against my chest. Someone had been rewriting my place in that family. Not overnight. Not in one argument. But gradually, layer by layer. Like painting over a mural until the original image was buried beneath someone else's design. And the surgery? That was the perfect opportunity. My granddaughter was weak, scared, vulnerable, surrounded by voices she trusted, except mine. I had been removed from her world long before I ever realized it. As the afternoon light slanted across my living room, I opened the drawer where I kept all the letters she'd written me over the years. Birthday cards. Father's Day notes, she always insisted I deserved one. Drawings from when she was little. Messages from holidays and school events. Each one filled with love so genuine it practically glowed off the paper. I spread them across the table, reading her handwriting. You're the best grandpa in the world. You always keep your promises. You make me feel safe. You're my forever family. Those were her words, her truth. Not the lies someone else had planted in her during her weakest moment. The more I looked at those notes, the more a quiet fury settled into my bones. Not anger in the wild, destructive sense, but anger with purpose. Anger that saw the difference between emotion and strategy. Anger that knew this wasn't just personal, it was calculated. Someone didn't just want me out. They wanted my granddaughter to believe she never needed me in the first place. And that was a line they should never have crossed. 2 days after I learned the truth from Ellen, I decided to stop waiting for answers to fall into my lap. Manipulation thrives in silence, and I'd stayed silent long enough. If they wanted to twist my granddaughter's mind, they would have to do it in front of me this time. I drove to my daughter's house just before dusk. The sky was bruised purple, clouds dragging low as if the world itself sensed the tension building. I parked at the curb and walked up the driveway, the familiar crunch of gravel under my boots sounding colder than ever. When I knocked, the door opened almost immediately, as if someone had been standing behind it, waiting. It was him. Her stepfather. Smugness wrapped around him like a second skin. "Didn't I tell you to stay away?" he said, arms folded, blocking the doorway as if he were the gatekeeper of my own blood. "I'm here to speak to my daughter," I replied. "And to make sure my granddaughter is recovering." "She's fine," he said sharply. "She doesn't need you confusing her." "Confusing her?" I repeated. "I taught her how to walk, how to build, how to trust. What exactly do you think I'm confusing?" His eyes narrowed. "You need to accept your place." "And what place is that supposed to be?" I asked. "The past," he snapped. "She's growing up. She doesn't need some old man interfering in her life." Before I could answer, my daughter stepped into view. She wasn't standing beside him, she was standing behind him, like a shadow attached to his back. Her posture was stiff, her eyes darting between us. "Mom," I said softly. "Can we talk alone?" She opened her mouth but he cut in, "Anything you say to her, you say to both of us." That told me everything. He wasn't just influencing her, he was controlling her. My daughter finally spoke, voice strained. "Dad, this isn't a good time." "I think it's the perfect time," I said, stepping forward. "I'm being told my granddaughter doesn't want me. That she's angry with me. But no one is explaining why." Her stepfather scoffed. "If she doesn't want to see you, respect that. You don't get to decide that for her," I said, my voice steady but carrying decades of authority. That struck a nerve. He stepped closer, too close, his breath hot with an anger that didn't match the situation. "You're not her parent," he hissed. "You don't make the rules. This is my home. My family." I felt something cold run through me, not fear, but clarity. "Funny," I said quietly, "because the girl you're talking about spent more years under my roof than under yours." His face reddened instantly, the truth exposing a crack in his confidence. My daughter flinched behind him, tears pooling in her eyes. "I'm not here to fight," I continued. "I'm here because I love my granddaughter, and I want to hear from her, not from you, why she suddenly doesn't want me in her life." He laughed. Actually laughed. A sharp, cruel sound. "You really think she owes you anything?" "No," I said. "Love isn't owed. But lies are paid for." His smile faltered. "You think you can come here and threaten me?" he said, voice rising. "I didn't mention a threat," I replied. "But it's interesting that your mind went there." My daughter grabbed his arm, whispering something I couldn't hear. For a moment, I saw fear in her eyes, fear of him, not of me. And that was when I realized the battle wasn't just for my granddaughter. It was for my daughter too. I stepped back, my voice calm but firm. I'll give her time. But I won't disappear. Not for you, not for anyone. He opened his mouth to retaliate, but I raised a hand. You've used silence as your weapon, I said. Now it's my turn to use truth as mine. I turned and walked back to my truck, leaving him seething in the doorway. The clash had begun. And he had no idea what was coming next. Let's continue. A week passed before I finally got a chance to see her alone. Not because they allowed it, but because fate stopped protecting their lies for a moment. It was late afternoon when my phone rang. The hospital number flashed across the screen. My heart jumped, fear, hope, confusion tangled into one painful knot. When I answered, a soft voice greeted me. Mr. Hale. Your granddaughter has a follow-up appointment today. She asked if someone could bring her jacket from home. Her parents aren't here yet. Are you available? I didn't think, I simply grabbed my keys and her old denim jacket from the back of my closet. The one she used to wear when we'd go fishing at dawn. The one she said smelled like sawdust and home. The drive was a blur. When I entered the clinic, the nurse smiled kindly and pointed me toward a small waiting room. My steps slowed as I saw her, sitting alone in a chair, legs pulled close, hair tied loosely at the back of her neck. She looked fragile, smaller than she should have been, like the surgery had stolen more than just her strength. For a fleeting second, her eyes lifted and met mine. A spark, recognition, warmth, longing, flared. The girl I'd raised, the child who once trusted me more than anyone, flickered through her expression like a flame struggling for air. But before I could take a step toward her, the flame died. Her face hardened. Her shoulders tensed. Her jaw locked into a stiffness I had never seen on her before, not even during her worst teenage storms. Why are you here? She asked, voice thin but sharp. I held up the jacket. The nurse called. She said you needed this. She didn't take it. She didn't even reach for it. She just stared, a mixture of anger and hurt swirling behind her eyes. Didn't they tell you? She asked. Tell me what? I replied quietly. She swallowed hard. I don't want you involved anymore. My heart stumbled. Involved in what? Your recovery. Your life. In anything. Her voice cracked, but her gaze stayed hard. I don't want you around. I don't want you calling. I don't want you visiting. I don't want you acting like we're close. I felt something inside me shift, like a wooden beam splitting under pressure. Where is this coming from? I asked. She looked away, eyes burning. Don't pretend you don't know. You left us. You only show up when it suits you. You make everything harder. The lies stung, not because they were believable, but because she believed them. Is that what they told you? I asked gently. Her lips tightened. They didn't have to tell me anything. I figured it out. Figured out what? That I raised you. That I supported you. That every birthday, every holiday, every crisis, I was the one who. Stop. She shook her head fiercely. Just stop. Tears threatened to spill, but she blinked them back like someone had taught her that crying was a weakness, not a release. You're making this harder, she whispered. I'm trying to understand. There's nothing to understand. She finally looked at me again, and the pain in her eyes nearly knocked the air out of my chest. I choose them. My family. Not you. My fingers tightened around the jacket. Family. Not you. The words landed like a hammer to the ribs. You're my granddaughter, I said, voice trembling for the first time. You'll always be my family. She shook her head. Not anymore. And then, slowly, deliberately, she held out her hand. Give me the jacket. Please. When I stepped closer and placed it in her hand, she didn't look at me. She didn't thank me. She didn't soften. Instead, she reached into the jacket pocket and pulled out something small, wrapped in faded paper. The wooden pendant. The one we carved together. The one she'd kept for 12 years. She pressed it into my palm without meeting my eyes. You can take this back, she whispered. I don't want it anymore. My throat closed. For a moment, I felt 66 years old all at once. Felt every disappointment, every sacrifice, every sleepless night tighten inside my chest. Is this really what you want? I asked. She hesitated, just a flicker, a heartbeat, but then she nodded. Yes. I opened my mouth to speak, but the door swung open. Her stepfather stood there, expression smug, satisfied, victorious. Time to go, he said. She stood, avoiding my gaze, and walked toward him. He placed a hand on her shoulder, guiding her out of the room as if she belonged to him. Just before she reached the door, she paused and whispered, barely audible. I'm sorry. And then she was gone. I stood alone in the room, the pendant cutting into my palm like the sharp edge of a truth I didn't want to face. For the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't just fighting lies. I was fighting someone who knew exactly how to weaponize the people I loved most. The house was too quiet when I got home. Not peaceful, hollow. The kind of silence that makes you aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing, your own aging bones. I set the wooden pendant on the kitchen table and just stared at it. Something so small, yet it felt heavier than a coffin. It wasn't the wood that weighed on me, it was what it represented. 12 years of memories. 12 years of love. 12 years of being her anchor. Returned to me like a receipt for a debt I never owed. I lowered myself into my rocking chair, the same one she used to climb onto when she was little, curling her legs under her as she listened to my stories, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I belonged in my own home. The walls looked unfamiliar, the floor colder, the air thinner. Her words replayed in my mind, each one cutting clean through every layer of strength I'd built over the years. I don't want you around. I choose them. You're not my family anymore. Not once did she look me in the eye when she said it. That was how I knew it wasn't truly her speaking. But knowing didn't make the ache any softer. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, hands clasped together. My fingertips were trembling, not from weakness, but from everything I hadn't allowed myself to feel in front of her. Grief, confusion, betrayal, and a quiet fury that simmered just beneath the surface. I didn't cry. Men of my generation weren't raised to cry. But I sat there for a long time, long enough for the sun to slide across the room, long enough for the shadows to grow long, long enough for the coffee I'd forgotten on the counter to turn cold. At some point, I reached out and picked up the pendant again. My thumb traced the little groove she carved when she was 5. The uneven edge. The tiny scratch she made when her hand slipped. I remembered her laughter, her concentration, the way she squeezed my arm afterward and said, "We made it together, Grandpa." Now I had it alone. The realization hit me then. I wasn't losing her. I had already lost her, piece by piece, long before the surgery. Someone had been chipping away at our bond while I was busy trusting the people around her. It was my silence that gave them space. My patience that gave them opportunity. My absence that gave them power. As the evening deepened, the first sliver of night creeping in through the windows, I felt a shift inside me, not dramatic, not explosive, but solid and unmistakable. A decision. Love had guided me for 17 years. But now love needed to take a different shape. Because if they were willing to take her from me using lies, I would bring her back with truth. Not anger. Not shouting. Not desperation. But truth that stood firm no matter how hard they tried to distort it. I placed the pendant back on the table and straightened up. The storm they had been trying to hide from me had finally broken open. And I wasn't going to be washed away by it. Not this time. The next morning, I woke with a heaviness in my chest that wasn't sleep, or age, or heartbreak. It was purpose, quiet, steady, and cold as steel. They wanted me erased from her life, but erasing a man like me isn't easy. I've built bridges in my time, literal ones, structures meant to hold thousands of tons without buckling. And I knew one thing with absolute certainty. A bond built with honesty doesn't collapse from a few whispered lies. It collapses only when truth stays buried. So I began digging. I pulled down the wooden box from the top of my closet, the one lined with old letters, photos, and mementos that chronicled my granddaughter's life from the moment she first toddled across my living room floor. It wasn't sentimentality that had made me keep everything, it was habit. Engineers keep records. We keep proof. And now, proof was exactly what I needed. I sat at the kitchen table and spread everything out, piece by piece. Birthday cards with her crooked handwriting. School pictures with her missing teeth smile. A stack of letters she wrote to me when she stayed at my house the year my daughter went through her divorce. I read the first one. Grandpa, thank you for always being here. I feel safest with you. Safe. The same girl who now claimed I made things harder had once begged me not to leave her alone when thunder rattled the windows. I opened another. I love that I can tell you everything. Mom doesn't listen the way you do. You understand me. Understand. Yet now she believed I confused her, words fed to her by someone who couldn't stand that she trusted me more than him. Letter after letter revealed a chain of affection so genuine it didn't even need defending. And yet I knew these memories weren't enough. Memories can be twisted. Emotions can be rewritten. But there are things that cannot be altered. Facts. Dates. Records. Screenshots. Voicemails. So I went further. I opened my old laptop and pulled up years of messages she'd sent me, photos of her school awards, holiday greetings, late-night chats where she vented about her stepfather's temper and controlling nature. One message hit me like a punch to the ribs. I don't like how he talks to Mom. Or me. I wish we could live with you again. That was 2 years ago. 2 years before the surgery. 2 years before he managed to bury her voice under his own. I scrolled further. Voicemails from her 15th birthday. A shaky recording of her crying after a fight with him. A message where she said, "You're the only one who listens." Another, "I don't trust him, Grandpa." She trusted me. She feared him. She confided in me. She avoided him. And somehow, in the span of a few months, he had flipped the entire narrative so thoroughly that she believed I was the problem. No. That didn't happen naturally. That happened strategically. I arranged everything into neat stacks. Letters. Photos. Messages. Voicemails. Screenshots. Evidence of a relationship built on truth. Then I noticed something I had forgotten, a sealed envelope in the bottom of the wooden box. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was hers, written when she was 9 years old, addressed to Grandpa and covered in stickers. I opened it carefully, like it was the last surviving artifact of an extinct species. Inside was a folded note. If anyone ever says bad things about Grandpa, I won't believe them. Grandpa is my best friend forever. 9 years old. She knew then what she couldn't see now. I felt something inside me shift, resolve, steady and unwavering. This wasn't about convincing her with sentiment or begging for forgiveness. This was about revealing the truth she had been blinded from. Truth doesn't need volume. Truth doesn't need theatrics. Truth just needs daylight. And now I had everything I needed to bring it to the surface. I gathered the evidence into a binder, closed it slowly, and looked at the wooden pendant resting on the table beside me. It seemed almost symbolic, the past and the present side by side. A memory returned, and a memory stolen. They thought I was old. They thought I was harmless. They thought I would crumble quietly. But they forgot something very important. A grandfather's love doesn't fade. It sharpens. It strengthens. And when pushed far enough, it fights back. By the time I finished assembling the binder of evidence, the sun had set and risen again. I hadn't slept, but exhaustion didn't touch me. What I felt wasn't weariness, it was certainty. For the first time since her surgery, I wasn't stumbling through confusion. I wasn't reacting. I wasn't guessing. I was preparing. And when a man prepares with truth on his side, he becomes a different creature entirely. The opportunity to confront them came sooner than I expected. My daughter called mid-morning, her voice trembling. "Dad, can you come over? There's tension in the house. She's upset. He's upset. I don't know what to do." She didn't say his name, but she didn't have to. Her silence painted it clearly. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I told her." I drove calmly, not angrily, not recklessly. I drove like a man heading to a meeting he had already won. When I arrived, the house felt heavy, choked with the kind of atmosphere that forms after too many secrets collide. My daughter opened the door, eyes red, shoulders tight. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "Where is she?" I asked. "In the living room." But before I could take a step, he appeared at the end of the hallway, blocking the path just as he had at the hospital. Only this time, his confidence wasn't smooth or controlled. It was cracked. "What is he doing here?" he snapped. "I told you we don't need him involved." "You don't get to decide that," my daughter whispered, but her voice was barely audible. I stepped forward. "I'm here because lies have gone on long enough." He stiffened. "What lies?" I held up the binder. "This," I said, "contains 12 years of truth. Messages. Letters. Photos. Everything she confided in me. Everything she trusted me with before you twisted her against me." His expression flickered, fear, then anger, then calculation. "You're pathetic," he spat. "Digging up old memories to manipulate her. You're making things worse." "No," I replied, voice steady. "You made things worse the moment you tried to erase me." He laughed, short, forced. "You think showing her nostalgia will change anything? She sees you for what you are now." I nodded slowly. "Then she can hear both sides." Before he could protest, I stepped past him and walked into the living room. My granddaughter sat curled in an armchair, knees pulled to her chest. When she saw me, she tensed, but she didn't look away this time. Her eyes were swollen from crying. "Grandpa," she whispered, barely audible. I knelt down in front of her and placed the binder gently on the coffee table. "I'm not here to argue with you," I said softly. "I'm not here to make you choose anything. I'm here to give you the truth that someone tried to bury." Her stepfather stormed in behind me. "Don't listen to him." I raised a hand without looking at him. "Sit down or stay silent. Either works." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't anger. It was authority, the kind he didn't know how to fight. He froze. I opened the binder. Letter after letter. Photo after photo. Screenshot after screenshot. Not one word of commentary. Not one attempt to sway her. Just truth laid out like stones, forming a clear path back to the person she once was. As she turned each page, her breathing grew unsteady. Tears gathered, broke, fell silently onto the paper. She reached one of the voicemails I had transcribed, the one where she said she didn't trust him. Her hand flew to her mouth. Did I really say all this? She whispered. Yes, I said gently. Before fear taught you to forget. Her stepfather lunged forward. Stop showing her. My daughter stepped between us. No, she said, voice steady for the first time in a long time. Let her see. He stared at her in disbelief. You're taking his side. I'm taking the truth's side. He scoffed and turned to leave the room, retreating, not out of dignity, but because exposure is a fire cowards can't stand near. My granddaughter's hands shook as she reached the last page, the one with her note from when she was 9. Grandpa is my best friend forever. She broke. Her shoulders trembled, and she whispered, what did I do? What have I been saying? Why did I listen to him? I took her hand. Because you were hurting. And hurting people grab onto the first voice they hear. She sobbed. Grandpa. I'm so sorry. For what? I asked. For forgetting who you are. I pulled her into my arms, careful, gentle, steady. Her tears soaked my shirt, just like they had when she was 14. But this time, the roles were reversed. This time, I was the one holding her together while the truth reshaped her world. And in that moment, one thing became perfectly clear. They had taken their shot. Now it was my turn. For a long moment after the truth settled between us, the living room felt like a place suspended outside time. My granddaughter clung to me with the desperation of someone who had just awoken from a nightmare and realized the monsters were real, and living in her own house. Grandpa, how could I say those things to you? She choked out between sobs. How could I tell you I wasn't your family? How did I let him make me believe you didn't care? I cupped her face gently, brushing away a tear the way I used to when she skinned her knees as a child. Because pain clouds judgment, I said softly. And fear listens to the wrong voices. She shook her head, trembling. I feel stupid. No, I whispered. You feel human. Her breathing stuttered as she tried to compose herself, but the more she fought the tears, the more violently they fell. She pulled away for a moment, hugging her knees to her chest, staring at the binder like it was a mirror reflecting a version of herself she didn't recognize. When I woke up after the surgery, she said shakily, I was scared. Everything hurt. And he was there before Mom, before anyone. He kept saying you didn't care. That you wouldn't come. That you'd moved on with your life. And I believed him because I didn't see you. Her voice cracked. I didn't see you, so I thought maybe he was right. My chest tightened. I tried to come, I said. He blocked me. Her eyes widened. Not with surprise, no, something closer to horrified confirmation. I had a feeling, she whispered. Every time I asked where you were, he changed the subject. Or made it seem like you didn't try. She swallowed hard. He told me you didn't even call. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was already unraveling the illusions she'd been fed. She looked toward the hallway where her stepfather had disappeared, fear flickering through her expression. He's always like that, she whispered. Controlling. Angry. He hates when I talk to anyone he can't manipulate. My daughter, standing quietly near the doorway, closed her eyes, as if her own guilt was finally too heavy to hold. She whispered, I should have stopped him. No, I said. You were surviving. That's not the same as enabling. My granddaughter wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Grandpa, when I gave you the pendant. I didn't want to. I felt sick doing it. But he was watching, and he told me that if I didn't set boundaries, I'd regret it. I didn't understand what he meant, but I felt pressured. I thought I had to do it. My heart broke and rebuilt itself in the same breath. I would never stop loving you because of a pendant, I said. Or because of words someone forced out of your pain. She reached for my hand, gripping it tightly. Can you forgive me? Even after everything I said? I lifted her chin gently until her tear-filled eyes met mine. I forgave you before you even said it, I whispered. Because the girl who said those things, wasn't you. She crumbled into my arms again, this time not in confusion, but in relief. Outside, I heard the front door slam, the stepfather leaving in anger. His footsteps pounded down the driveway like a retreating warning. But for the first time, my granddaughter didn't flinch. She stayed in my embrace, steadying her breath. And in that moment, I knew the tide had turned. Her heart was no longer his battleground. It was coming home. When her tears finally slowed, she didn't let go of my hand. She held it the way she used to as a child, fingers curled tightly, as if she feared that releasing her grip would make me disappear again. But I wasn't going anywhere. Not now. Not after everything they tried to take from us. My daughter moved closer, kneeling beside us. For a moment, the three of us sat there in a small circle of quiet, the house around us finally still, as though it had stopped holding its breath. It wasn't peaceful yet, but it was no longer hostile. It was healing. My granddaughter wiped her face, cheeks blotched red, voice still trembling. Grandpa. I don't know how to fix all this. We start small, I said. Piece by piece. That's how every bridge is rebuilt. Not all at once, just one beam at a time. She nodded slowly, absorbing every word like someone desperate to believe in something stable again. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the wooden pendant she'd returned to me. Her eyes widened, tears resurfacing. Grandpa. I'm so sorry about that. I never wanted to let it go. I opened her palm gently and placed the pendant inside, closing her fingers around it. You didn't break this, I whispered. And you didn't break us. Someone else tried to bend what wasn't theirs to touch. She looked down at her hand, staring at the pendant as if seeing her childhood reflected in the carved heart. Does it still mean something? She asked, barely above a whisper. It means everything, I replied. Because it reminds me that you and I built something real, something no one can rewrite. Not him. Not lies. Not fear. A soft sob escaped her, but this time it wasn't from grief, it was from relief. She leaned her forehead against mine, a gesture I hadn't felt in years, and whispered, I want to get back what we had. I want to be myself again. You already are, I said. You just needed the truth to clear the fog. After a moment, she pulled away and exhaled shakily. Can we go somewhere? Just us. Like we used to. Anywhere you want, I said. She hesitated, then smiled faintly. The lake. Our lake. The place where she learned how to skip stones, where we watched sunrises wrapped in blankets, where she first told me her dreams. The place untouched by their lies. My daughter stood, wiping her face. Go, she said softly. She needs you. She's needed you for a long time. I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I saw regret rather than avoidance. She stepped forward and hugged me, tentatively at first, then tightly. I'm sorry, Dad, she whispered. I should have protected her. And I should have protected you, too. We're here now, I said, holding her briefly. And that's enough. My granddaughter slipped her hand back into mine with the certainty of a child who'd found her way home after getting lost in the dark. Together, we walked out of the house, leaving behind the remnants of manipulation and fear. The sky outside was shifting toward sunset, streaked with orange and soft gold, the kind of evening that promises a gentler tomorrow. As we headed toward the lake, her grip tightened, steady and sure. She looked up at me and said, Grandpa. Thank you for not giving up on me. I squeezed her hand. Grandpa doesn't give up, I said quietly. He rebuilds. The lake was quiet when we arrived, the water still enough to hold the sky like a mirror. It looked exactly the same as it had a decade earlier, when she was small enough to sit on my lap while I guided her hands to skim stones across the surface. Now she stood beside me, older, wounded, but finally free from the fog that had wrapped around her heart. We sat on the old wooden bench near the shoreline. The boards creaked under our weight, weathered by rain and years, yet somehow still strong. I suppose that made it the perfect place for us now, two people who had been strained, bent, nearly broken, but not destroyed. She leaned her head on my shoulder, the pendant resting against her chest, catching the last light of the setting sun. For a long time, we didn't speak. We didn't need to. Some things are rebuilt through silence, not the silence that wounds, but the silence that allows truth to breathe. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "I thought I lost you." "You did," I said gently. "But losing someone doesn't always mean they're gone. Sometimes it means you've been pushed away. Sometimes it means someone else stood between you and the truth." I turned slightly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But you found your way back. That's what matters." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I won't let anyone take me away from you again. I promise." Promises are delicate things. They can be broken, twisted, or forgotten. But this one felt different. It wasn't a childish promise. It wasn't desperation. It was clarity, earned through pain, reclaimed through truth. I looked out over the lake, the reflection of the sky blurring slightly as the wind stirred. "You know," I said quietly, "family isn't just blood. It's the people who stand with you when everything else shakes. The people who don't disappear, even when it would be easier to walk away." She squeezed my hand. "Then you're my only real family." I smiled, not because I needed to hear it, but because she finally understood what had always been true. "Family," I said, "isn't something anyone can take from you. Not with lies. Not with control. Not with fear. Truth always finds its way back to the surface, just like this lake clears after a storm." She rested her head against me again, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something settle inside me. Not victory. Not revenge. Just peace. The kind of peace that comes after surviving something you never should have had to face. The kind of peace that comes when you realize the battle is over, not because you destroyed anyone, but because truth did what truth always does. It stood up. It spoke. And it healed. If this story touched you, even a little, don't forget to subscribe. It helps this channel grow, and it tells me that stories like mine still matter. Stories about truth. About love. About family that refuses to break, no matter how hard someone tries to fracture it. Thank you for listening. And wherever you are, take care of your heart, and the people who deserve a place in it.